Welcome. Good morning. So today we're going to be talking about analytics and Workbench, and Cathy's going to be doing the second half of this presentation. First, I wanted to take a step back and assume that not everyone is using analytics within OTM Cloud, and talk a little bit about the landscape, what we're talking about when we talk about analytics in OTM Cloud and GTM Cloud as well. So first, we're talking about OAC very soon, but for now it's OAS. I think Jim mentioned that in his presentation. We're moving the analytics stack to cloud, but that won't change the key components. So first, we have Oracle Analytics Publisher, which more of our customers use compared to the newer data visualization and dashboards. This has full operational schema access, so you have access to the full data model with the exception of some security related restrictions, historical and archive schemas. So this has been something, I don't know if there are many who have been on OTM long enough that you're using the archive schema for some of your older data. But you can actually create reports that pull data and merge data from the archive schema and your OLTP schema. VPD awareness, so this is security related, so just make sure that there's no misunderstanding. If you have data restrictions at the user level in the application, those are carried forward into the analytics application as well. So the data is segmented that way as well. We give you full SQL select statement access in OAP. So this can be a blessing and a curse. I think some of you probably have some long-running extracts with very complex SQL statements and have run into some issues with that. But in addition to SQL Select data, you can actually pull DV data and analysis data into an OAP report. So if you have someone who understands your data model but can't write SQL, then they can stage the underlying data for a pixel perfect report in OAP using the drag and drop capability of data visualization. So that's a nice newer feature that we've come into. Direct SQL execution, what you write in OAP will be sent directly to the database with the VPD predicates. So, like I said, a blessing and a curse for that. Email is probably the most common way that we distribute with OAP. But there is also an interactive HTML, and that functionality, now that we've embedded OAP and DV into the main application, allows you to create workbenches that have OAP components. So if you have a piece of data that you need to compute or calculate, derive, that can't be displayed via the normal UI for whatever reason because it's complex calculation, then you can actually perform that calculation in OAP and embed that in a workbench. So that's a pretty powerful capability with Workbench embedding. Now on data visualization, this is the newer, and we'll have a lot of examples at the end of this presentation of some use cases for data visualization. It's primarily driven by historical subject areas. That's where most of the data is. We have added operational subject areas, which are going directly from your live data. It's pulling data, and it's creating that's the assisted SQL execution. It's creating the SQL statements as you drag and drop from the catalog. So schedulable storage, for that we're talking about something called a data set, where you can actually stage the extraction of a table of data coming from different business objects, and that is stored for further analysis. So if you have a big table that you're extracting to send to analysts to manipulate in Excel, you can do the same thing by running a single data set that gathers all of the underlying data, and they can perform their analysis within data visualization based on that without requerying the database. Schedulable ETL, so that is something that we're talking about for the historical subject areas. Once a day, once a week, whatever your cadence is, to get the historical information synchronized. And then there is some limited capability on the export of data and content. Data visualization, it's not a perfect corollary to PowerPoint. It's meant to be interactive. So once you take data out of that environment, you lose a lot of the capability of analysis. So we recommend that the analysis be carried out within DV, and we'll see some examples of that user interface in the next few slides. But before we go into the use cases for data visualization, I had 3 things that I wanted to touch on, and that's the new subject areas. That's something that we are continually adding more content to analytics. OAC adoption, talk about the timeline for that, and sustainability. So we now have some dedicated assets in sustainability that are out of the box. So first, new subject areas. Transportation operational intelligence. This is rather limited right now. It's shipments, order releases, and invoices. And we don't have all of the child objects. That's something that we're adding now. We're adding shipment stop, shipment cost, some of those important elements. But we do have statuses for all 3 of those. So by bringing in the live operational status of those 3 key business objects, we enable a whole new use of the embedding capability in the Workbench, and I'll touch on that more in a moment. Global trade operational intelligence, this is coming here this spring and summer. It'll be rolling out to you. We had a lot of excitement, I think, around the transportation operational intelligence subject area, so we extended that, and we're hoping that that helps our global trade customers as well, especially with the embedding capability. And system performance intelligence. So this one, more technical. It has to do with measuring the performance of your integrations, your agent executions, all of the kind of thread level activity in the system. That when you turn on the system performance monitoring in the application, we're bringing that over to DV now. So you can have a dashboard in a Workbench that gives you a health check, an overview, so that you can see where there are backlogs, which agents are taking longer to run, what their mean and and max min execution times are. So it allows you to really create a system monitor view within the application. OAC adoption. So this has been a while that we've been working on this. We integrated aspects of the application, data visualization in particular, before adopting OAC. So we wanted to get the integration between OAS and our Workbench and UI infrastructure out of the way before adopting cloud. But that should be this year, rolling out. And it should be no, we don't expect any disruption to the cutover. Sustainability. So this is an example of an out-of-the-box data visualization canvas that we've created. You can see here we've got multiple tabs with different information. This is the CO2 emission summary that once you configure the sustainability functionality within the core application, this will work out of the box. So you can monitor these factors without any further configuration. Now, I wanted to spend, 33 minutes. Okay, so like maybe 5 to 10 minutes talking about use cases, and also get some idea of what this application looks like deployed in a Workbench. So first, a business monitor. Like I said, we have statuses for all of our objects that we're bringing in to the operational intelligence, transportation operational intelligence subject area. So that allows us to not only sort our objects based on statuses that are native to the system, like you see order planning, shipment en route, shipments in transit, but other statuses that relate to your particular business processes. As long as they're modeled, you can create a dashboard directly within the main application now that has links. So to each of those related segments. So if you, for instance, were looking at shipment en route and you had a delayed segment, that delayed segment can open up a workbench that's dedicated to resolving shipment delay issues. Control towers. So again, and you can see here, this is directly within OTM now. This is embedded in a Workbench. You don't need the full DV canvas to use the entire Workbench. You can also use it in segments, and we have examples of that as well. But you can see here it gives a much more graphical and summary overview of your business processes, so that you can see where you need to intervene with conditional formatting, and the library of visualizations available in DV is quite extensive. Control tower for shipments. You can see the maps are great within DV. That's an example of a cluster map there that has shading by density, by number of shipments, size by number of shipments. There's also heat maps that are automatically computed when you add the elements to the map. Those are quite powerful as well. Cost monitoring. I think this is another example where you can see we can use trend lines within DV to analyze, to forecast based on a regression fit to the past data. And sustainability, there are more things beyond what we put in the prepackaged sustainability dashboard that you can look into, and particularly because there are some calculations that take place within analytics itself for some of our other emissions factors. So that's our older emission-related functionality. And I think carrier performance. So this is one thing that we've seen is that giving access in the serve-prof domain to a carrier so that they can have a scorecard to see how am I doing this week, this month, in terms of performance, tender acceptance rates, actuals versus planned for cost and transit. And that was mine.
Okay. So I'm Cathy Hayes, the lucky product manager who's been affiliated with the UI and Workbench over way too many years to actually say. So I'm going to go through a lot of the things that we've delivered in the 25A and B releases. And if we have time, I'll do a little sneak peek of what's coming in the future. We'll start with Workbench, and I've divided it into infrastructure, table, and Gantt, and then we'll go into general UI and ideally get into the roadmap highlights a little bit. So one of the things we did in 25A for the Workbench is that if you're exporting a Workbench, we now will export the related objects as well, including your Finder sets, your saved queries, et cetera. Previously, you would have to do all of that separately. So this simplifies that process. And I'm going to talk pretty fast because there's a lot of slides. The next one is layout templates. And this eases the process of creating a new layout. You can use a template, which you can predefine like the different sections of a Workbench. So you can easily just use one of those templates to create your Workbench and then populate it as you want to without having to create the regions each time you create a Workbench layout. And here's a little video of how that happens. I'm not sure if everybody can see it in the back, but once you create your Workbench and you select that you want to use a layout, it'll then populate with those 4 sections as defined in the template. You can also create your own template. So you wanted to create one with 8 different regions, 10, whatever your heart desires, you can create a template to be used by your users. Another thing we did was overriding the hidden setting for the navigation bar for the admin. Previously, if you set it to not be visible, it would not be visible for the admin users, which is less than helpful if you need to manage that Workbench. So now that setting of being not visible is ignored for admin users, making the ability to edit and manage Workbenches a little bit easier. Another thing, I feel like every time I'm doing a presentation, I have at least one slide about something that's going away. And this is that for this year. The Dock and Yard Manager is on its last leg. So if anyone is using this screen, you need to start using the Workbench. So we do have a warning on this screen now, advising users that it's going away in 26A. Is anybody using this screen? Excellent, okay. This first one, I don't have a screenshot, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Anybody who managed column widths in a Workbench, in the enhanced Workbench world, has been frustrated with the fact that adjacent columns get adjusted as well. That's no longer the case. The underlying technology that we use has finally corrected that behavior. Another thing is we had a workaround for being able to either drag data or copy data within a Workbench table. That workaround is going away because now the underlying technology supports the ability to select text directly from a table without having to say, I want to select text to copy. So those two icons are going away from the table toolbar. Another thing we did is folks have found it difficult to know what they've edited using inline edit before they click save. So now you can set a logic configuration to indicate that you want the changes to be highlighted. And once you have that setting, when you make changes in the Workbench table, it's presented in this highlighted fashion. So you'll see all of the fields that are highlighted in blue are ones where I've made changes. And when I click the save, those highlights are removed. So it's evident to the user the changes that they've made. Another thing is when we were doing inline edit and mass update, we always showed the GID rather than the XID. So now you have the capability to indicate using a logic configuration whether or not you just want the XID. If that's set, you will not see the domain name when you go into edit those fields. And surprisingly enough, there are still objects that we are adding to the Workbench. So we've added the object of the quote, and then we've also added the ability to set default values for whether or not you want the vertical and horizontal lines to be present in the table. So you can control that in the table parameters or set the default when you're creating the table. In 25B, one of the cool things that we did is allowing you to define how you want your grouped table to be sorted. So now you can indicate which of the fields that you're grouping by are used to sort. So you'll notice here that I'm having my groups sorted by the source city. So it just allows more control of how that data is presented to the end users. One of the things that was previously only available on the detail table when you grouped was the ability to ungroup. Now we've added that to the parent table as well. So if you have a parent table that's defined to be grouped, you can now ungroup it, which is a pretty, well, you might ask, why do I want to do that? One of the reasons is that a limitation of the grouped table is that you can't do inline edit. So if your users require a lot of inline editing and they have a grouped table, they can ungroup the table, make their changes, and then group it again. Some Gantt-related features. This was 25A. Previously, the Gantt chart time range parameter was ignored for certain Gannts, for the doc Gantt. So now you can indicate whether or not you want that to be abided by. Another thing that we were limited on previously that now we're able to allow is the ability to right-click in an empty slot. This allows you to right-click in an empty slot and indicate if you want to block that slot or create an appointment. So that just eases the end user process as well. And the actions that are available in that right-click menu are based on what's configured for the user. So that's a combination of screen set, logic configuration, and power actions. Some of the general UI features that we did was we didn't previously allow you to define a default value for radio button fields in the search of a screen set. Now you can. So you can set whether or not yes, true, both. It's random set of values. But any radio button, you can now define a default setting. And one of the things in line with what Jim spoke about yesterday is that we're continuing on this Redwood journey. And so far, we're focusing on areas that don't require configuration. And one of the primary is in OTM and GTM, where we don't allow configuration is power data. So we've begun to sort of convert the power data screens into a Redwood format. So you'll notice that now on public menus, there's a configuration group, and that is where we're housing these new Redwood screens. And it's going to probably take me 20 years to stop using the term power data. But that's where those are going. And so far, we're rolling out a lot of qualifiers, like very simple screens. In the next few releases, we'll start to do more of the complex ones. We'll start with profiles and ones that have children and grandchildren and figure out how they'll look in the Redwood world. So they're now under the configuration grouping. They're also accessible through the global search. And one of the big wins of using this format is that it's a single screen. You no longer have to do the search and get to a separate page to create or edit. It's all within a single page. So for now, when you go to the configuration, it's limited to qualifiers, and you'll get a list of all the qualifiers for that, that transactional area. So in this case, it was shipment management, and these are all the qualifiers in this drop list. For shipment management, once I select one of those, it immediately populates the table with all the values. If I have proper access, I can edit any of these records. I can create a new record all within this table directly. So I'm not opening separate screens. I can do searches in that search bar, which are essentially filters. Since I've already populated all of that data, I'm now filtering down to the relevant data that I want to work on. So in the first example, I think I have bond, and then in the next example, I have bond and something else, and it's using an and clause for those two values. So I'm fine-tuning the list of results. And you can also create a new record in line by clicking the little add button, and it just creates it directly in the table. No separate screens are opening. It's all right there. I can manage the records by clicking the little pencil icon, and I get the possible actions of editing, deleting, or just canceling out of the edit function. And also, in the general UI bucket in 25B is the ability to use, because now we're using reference numbers and remarks in screen set results, and you can do inline edit of those, which has been something that everybody has wanted for a very long time. Now you can do that, but take it a step further and establish fixed list of values for those fields. So if you don't want your users to enter just free text for those, when they're doing inline edit or mass update, you can define a fixed drop list of values. And that'll be honored in the inline edit and mass update. And that is both in legacy search results along with Workbench tables. So you'll see here I'm doing inline edit, and I've established a fixed list. So the top screen is inline edit, and the bottom is mass update. So the user has no other option than to select one of those values. How am I doing on time? Okay. So we'll do a little highlights, and then we'll open it up to questions for Brian and I. The Redwood uptake is going to continue. As I said before, we're so far focusing on the fields or the objects that don't require configuration. We are, in the background, trying to figure out what the configuration capabilities will be as we move to Redwood. And we're hoping, planning, to continue to use screen sets wherever possible. We know that it's pretty painstaking for everybody to have to recreate any of those configuration tools, such as screen sets and manager layouts. So we are going to try to keep that as seamless as possible. In the Workbench, we're looking to add more components. There's a lot of visualization capability in the tools that Brian showed for analytics. We're looking to bring some more visualization tools directly into Workbench, including the diagram and scoreboard, and I'll show you some examples of that in the later slide. And then MapLibre will be yet another map vendor that we're looking to support in probably the 26 timeframe. And then adding the ability to create and delete directly within a detail table of a Workbench. So one of the first things we're looking at, one of the first objects we're looking at to support that is the shipment cost. So if you have your shipment Workbench and you have a detail table with costs defined, This capability would allow you to add or remove shipment costs directly in that table. So that's one of the things we're taking a look at. And these look similar to what Brian showed, but these are ideally going to be capabilities within the Workbench itself. So we're looking to add the scoreboard component where you can establish different cards, and then upon clicking on one of those cards, other regions of the Workbench would present the relevant data. One of the things we've heard over the years is, how can I move my business monitor directly into a Workbench? And we're thinking this might move us toward that goal. Here's a little video. You just click the different card and you get different information, whether it be tables, other visualization tools. We're not sure how far we can take it when we embed it within the Workbench, but we have some lofty goals. So we'll see how far we get. Another thing we're looking to bring directly into the Workbench are tools to be able to diagram things. In particular, the network example is one of the first things we're looking at, where it presents to the user another tool to be able to define or refine their network.